Welcome to the Artistic Foodies, the show that explores life through the lens of art and food. I'm Abbas Muhammad.
And I'm Irfan Raidan.
And today we're talking about the Domestic Crusaders, a play by Wajahat Ali. We will continue this conversation with our guests in our next episode as well. So be sure you catch them both on Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. In this episode, we talk to the playwright Wajahat Ali, as well as a couple of actors from the play's New York premiere at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, namely Monisha Shiva, who played the daughter Fatima, and Abbas Zaidi, who played Dada Hakim.
Wajahat Ali is a columnist at the Daily Beast, a former New York Times writer, and a former CNN political commentator. In this interview, we discuss his award-winning 2003 play, The Domestic Crusaders, which was the first major play about Muslim Americans in a post-9/11 world. We also got a chance to chat about his new memoir, Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American.
I'm here. Is it okay if I drink chai?
Yes. I have my chai here too.
Okay, sweet.
And I have a copy of your book. Your new
Nice.
Not your latest, but your new version of Domestic Crusaders.
You know what? You know who doesn't have a copy? Me. So you have something that I don't have, which is hilarious. So inshallah, one day I'll get it. But anyway, the few people who've gotten it say it looks really nice. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, it's good. It's bringing back some memories of.
Yeah, man.
I was there at your first showing at Mehran Restaurant. When you did the reading, and it was pretty funny stuff. It was like the first time that anybody kind of saw like a Pakistani family portrayal. And, everybody could relate to it because, we kind of grew up in that similar situation. Everybody who knows you knows kind of how you got into the writing. But for the people who don't know you, give us a brief summary of how you kind of got into writing.
Oh, the brief summary. So what the interesting thing is? Everyone expects the answer to be like, "Oh, I went and got an MFA and I took this class, and I took the MasterCard master class and sat there and cranked it out." But the reality is, and this was kind of a gem of a wisdom that my director Carla Blank told me. I didn't take a playwriting class or I didn't get an MFA. I'm just like this English major. I really don't have that experience. And then she corrected me and she said, knowing something about me growing up in the Bay Area in Fremontistan, Zindabad, she said, actually, you've been doing this your whole life. You and your friend Kashif used to make homemade movies. And you told me that you did improv comedy. And then you told me you did sketch comedy where you wrote and directed and acted at UC Berkeley. And, you were just doing this stuff for fun. And I was like, oh, yeah, the stuff that we did for fun growing up was actually the training ground for the rest of my career. Is just that I didn't connect the two. And also being, I think you could say Desi, right? I'm Pakistani. My family's originally from Karachi, pre-partition Hyderabad. But I think for many of us growing up, and especially in the Bay, this will probably sound very familiar, is when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, I'm old, we just didn't have Hassan Minhaj or Riz Ahmed or Kumail Nanjiani or Mindy Kaling or Never Say Never on Netflix. We just didn't have that. And our parents, in a strange way to love us, gave us this checklist of success. And writer was never on that checklist. It was doctor, engineer, businessman, and like after 9/11, maybe lawyer, but corporate lawyer. A lawyer who's not a duffer, who makes at least six figures. So in the back of our head, people who really indulged in arts and culture, we loved it, but we're like, there's no path for us. We couldn't imagine it. So you're like, okay, I'll become a lawyer or an engineer, and maybe I'll do this as like you couldn't. It was always in the back of my mind that this is what I wanted to do, but I was never able to really envision it clearly or say it with the type of confidence that young kids have now that I'll grow up to be a writer, because it just seems so alien to me. But in the back of my head, it was always there, which probably explains why I was undeclared until my fourth year of college, because I probably kind of always knew. And I was also like just very curious and trying out all these different subject matters. But, we just didn't have the models. We just didn't have the models or the encouragement. And I will say that my parents, I talk about this often, are very traditional Pakistani parents, but also very untraditional. And in this regards, when I had written a story at the age of 10, and Miss Peterson, my homeroom teacher from Kentucky, made us write a 1-page short story. I wrote a 10-page short story. And she gave me an A+++ on that story, an original story. And she made me recite it in front of the homeroom. And I was like this shy, really fat, mashallah, tandrust, as they say, healthy, husky pants wearing kid. And I recited this story, and my class for the first time loved it, which was amazing to me because I was shy, I was fat, I was, insecure. I used to sweat profusely while talking. Still do. And I took that story home to Ammi Abu. Abu was reading the story, drinking chai like I am now. And he finished the story and goes, "Beta, you should think about becoming a writer. You have a talent." And I remember Ammi ran out and said, "But first become a doctor." But they always encouraged me. That's the funny thing, is they always encouraged this talent and said that you have something and you should invest in it. So that's where I got really lucky, that teachers and my parents and enough mentors along the way in a place like Fremont, where there's very little encouragement, at least when I was growing up, I was able to nurture this, some would say talent, or some would say probably skill, into something that became a career.
Armin, what was the setting in which you wrote and came out with this piece of work, and why did you come out with it at that time?
So I started writing the play Domestic Crusaders as a 21-year-old senior at UC Berkeley. I had just turned 21. 9/11 had happened 2 months ago. My professor for a short story writing class that I happened to just enroll in and get in, Ishmael Reed, who's a MacArthur genius, a titan of American literature, an African-American man. We had to write short stories. Like, it was like one of those really terrifying, intimidating environments where it was like 12 of us in a room, and like every couple of weeks you'd write a story and like read it in front of your peers, and they would just tear it apart. And so 9/11 happened, and I was an MSA board member. And I always joked with folks that like some dark humor is necessary, that if Muslims knew that 9/11 would happen, I would have joined the Indian Student Association, not the Muslim Student Association, right? Like, I would have dated cute girls and gone like learn how to do bhangra and like get tech support and join the Indus like annual awesome talent show. But honestly, yeah, I went to UC Berkeley, and for the first time I was like, oh, Muslims are like I'm not the token Muslim. There's a hijabi, and they're like, it was wild to me. It was amazing because I was always often like the token Muslim and token brown guy. By token, I mean like the only dude who used to represent in high school and elementary school. So I was so excited to see like Muslims on campus. So, and the Muslim Student Association and the Indian Student Association like orientation meeting was at the exact same time, literally across from each other. And it's like a sliding.
You have to make a choice.
Yeah. And I know the Muslims at that time did it on purpose. They're like, join us, don't join the evil side. They do, because this was a wild time, like the late 90s, was like the hotbed of Salafism. And creeping in of traditionalism, and then hypocrisy and confusion all around. And so people are like, don't go to the Indus. They do the dating and the dancing. Come to us. Astaghfirullah. Come to us where we do none of that, but on the DL, and we're all freaks. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'd make the sliding door moment, and instead of going left to the Indus, which is also pretty amazing to see all these South Asian and brown folks, right? So I went to MSA. So long story short, somehow I become the MSA board member, one of the 5. I didn't have a real title, but I guess you'd call me vice president. And 9/11 happens, and you guys remember this. We're that generation where America lost its mind. And overnight, even though we were in the Bay Area, the ripple effects of 9/11 reverberated globally. And so the day that it happened, we were watching the Two Towers fall. I was in my pajamas. We started getting these phone calls from hijabi girls, girls I'm saying at that age, meaning around my age, teenagers, afraid to go out. We had to do escort service. We got hate mail. I mean, we were in California, right? But overnight, the enemy became Muslims. It became a civilizational war between something called Islam and the West. You guys remember this, right? The country went crazy.
Yes.
And so for 2 months, I kind of became an accidental activist. I always joke, and we all became like these cultural ambassadors of Islam, and we had to be perfect. And the media came, and you had to organize. And oh, by the way, I was also a senior at UC Berkeley trying to figure out my major and had to go to school. So in this environment, I remember that, oh crap, I got to write a story and present it. And so in the like Fajr time, I wrote this insane story about these two ogres celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary who hate each other, and they poison each other's goblet and try to kill each other during the dinner toast. And I wrote this. I don't know what happened. I was like Fajr time. I got inspired to write the story. I write the story. I go to class. I read it. I think Ishmael Reed, my teacher, is going to yell at me. But instead he says, see me after class. And I'm like, oh man, he's going to rip me apart. I haven't been to school like 3 weeks. And he goes, I think dialogue and characters are your strength. You write really good short stories, but you ever tried writing a play? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, right. This country is going to haze Muslims for the next few years. Next 10 years is going to be really tough for you. Take it from me. I'm a black man. They've been hazing us for 400 years. It's asymmetrical. You don't have the power, but we've always fought back. And the way we fought back is through art and culture and storytelling. And so I'm really curious to read an American kitchen drama, but I've never really read it from the perspective of your folks. Like, you're what, Pakistani Muslim? You ever read Death of a Salesman or Long Day's Journey into Night or Raising the Sun? I'm like, yes. He goes, yeah, write me something like that. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is a short story class. He goes, no, I think you'll be fine. Okay, listen, write me 20 pages of a play about what are you again? I said, fat, scared, what? And he goes, no, a Pakistani Muslim American family, and give me 20 pages or you'll fail the class. All right, bye.
Wow, ultimatum.
Yeah, and he's like, okay, and yeah, don't waste your time in the class. You don't have to come to class anymore if you don't want to. Or I'll see you in 2 months. So I started it for my 21st birthday, and I remember, here's a deep cut. There used to be a Borders in Fremont, California, off of Maury and Fremont Boulevard, right across from a Barnes and Nobles. And I don't think either the Barnes and Borders are there anymore. This is a deep cut for Fremontonians. And I used to, being a Pakistani kid, with Eidi money at that time, I think they stopped giving me Eidi at 21. I saw the return policy at Borders, and it was like, you can return anything in 11 days. So I went to the drama section, picked up 2 plays, read it, returned it by the 10th day. Did it like 3 times. I ended up reading like 6 or 8.
Such a desi thing to do.
Super desi thing. It was amazing. But I felt like, so I'm like, all right, I read 7, 8 plays. And then the first thing I did is I sat and I wrote down 6 character sketches. I'm an only child. And the play is about 6 family members in a Pakistani Muslim American family. Dada, the grandfather who survived partition, Ammi Abu, immigrant parents, and 3 American kids. I'm an only child. So I made a test for myself that I wouldn't make it autobiographical, just as a test. And I fleshed it out. I wrote 20 pages. I passed the class. And then every couple of months, my professor would keep bothering me for 5 more pages. The story of Domestic Crusaders. And Ishmael Reed kept bothering me for 5 more pages. And so I had written like 25 pages. I took like a year off. And I remember just something inside me inspired me to say, like, everything is gone. I have nothing left. No one can take this story away from me. I'll at the very least finish this play. And that's the one thing I'll have in life. And before my 23rd birthday, I made a vow to finish it. So when I sat down to write the rest of the play, even though I wrote it like in 2 weeks, which is like a fever, like dream, like release, it took me like 2 years. Does that make sense? And with that type of history and experiences, I was able to then finish off the arc of the play. And then when the play was finished, I had just turned 23. And then Ishmael said, my wife, Carla Blank, who's a teacher and dancer, she'll help direct it. And so we did this staged reading at Mehran. Everyone knows Mehran in the Bay Area. And it was DIY. Everything was pure DIY. Irfan remembers this. We did our first like auditions at, the library. People laughed at us, but then word spread. They're like, oh, the script doesn't suck. And so when we did these auditions at Mehran and Chandni are like, we'll give you space to do the auditions as long as you can like buy 7 or 8 buffets a weekend. and like we used to get enough people that they used to come and buy the buffets. And by like after a month of auditioning local talent, even I swear to God, the Chandni workers auditioned for the role of the father and the mother. And so, I did everything myself. We did the press release. We made our own music. And then I went to Mehran. The final story I'll tell you, because it's hilarious, is I'm like, okay, Fayaz. I think Fayaz still owns Mehran. I'm like, my father told me to talk to you. And he said to give you the space give me the space, and I'll transform it into a dinner theater experience. No one's done this before. People have shadis and weddings here, and milads and religious functions. I'll make a stage reading with lights and an elevated stage, and we'll get people, and I'll make something new for you, and there'll be press. I was like a salesman, and I'm like, give me a buffet, because I know my people, they won't come without a buffet for a good price. And Fayaz is like, I'll give you everything in a buffet for $10. So I went home, and my father's like, $10? No. And then he drove me back to Mehran. My father says, I'm here to see Fayaz. My father rolls up his ego, and I swear to God, he goes, Fayaz, how long have I done business with you? My son, I sent him to you to give him a good deal, and you gave him a $10 price? How dare you? You will give him the space, a 5-course buffet, chai, and dessert for $6 a head. And that's how we got it for $6 a head. And I remember I set the price for $15. I talked to Mujahid Chacha, my Chacha, and I'm like, yo, if I give you my play and a dope buffet for $15, will you come? In my own blood, Mujahid Chacha says, if you make it $10, I'll think about it. And so if Vaughn remembers this, is I kept it for $10. It's a 2-act play. I kept the buffet in intermission to make sure people saw the first act. And the capacity was like 200 people. We sold 350 tickets, and everyone at first came as a tamasha. Tamasha means like a spectacle, because they were like, Irfan was saying, is like, they're like, what is this? No one's done this before. Who's this? Let's look at this son of criminals. No, I'm serious. Like, and maybe the criminal parents will be there, and look at this stupid play. So it was like most people came for a tamasha. And also because I cast a lot of local talent, people came to support the local talent as well. The test was, would they leave during the intermission? Because, look, first act is done. I've given you Kana. After Kana, you can leave. They all stayed, and then we got a standing ovation, and that's when I knew we had something. Wow. So you asked me a simple question, I gave you a story.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that's some very interesting stuff. I didn't know a lot of that thing, so thanks for sharing that.
I'm really proud of the fact that we stuck to our guns. We kept all the merchant masala. We didn't whitewash it. And what we did was, I realized very early that if I had gone through the traditional mainstream channels, I would still be waiting to publish the play or produce the play in 2021. Oh, wow. So what we did was independent grassroots. We did it ourselves, and our parents came and built the mosque themselves. I guess this was like, we'll just do it ourselves. And you guys know from the Bay Area, and Hassan says this, Hassan Minaj, he tells me this. He goes like, bro, you were like a flower that bloomed from concrete, bro. And what? And I think what he means,
took that from Tupac.
Yeah, and he's like, because I remember this is how the way the world works. Hassan met me when I was a grad student, and he was an undergrad, and he was a young kid, and he goes, oh, you're the guy who wrote the play, you did it. And so that's how long me and Hassan have known each other. But what he was saying was, our environment, our community is not conducive towards nurturing this talent. So not just the mainstream, as corporate mainstream entertainment has marginalized and sidelined us, also our own community. Because they didn't see any models of success. And they're like, beta, ye bakwas hai, this is useless. And uncle said, beta, why don't you do something useful like protest? And so my desire was twofold, was to excite and sell our story to my own community and make them believe that it's worthwhile. And there was so much doubt. Even after the Mehran, where we premiere, where we got standing ovation, every single premiere in San Jose, in Berkeley, and Mehran, there was always some auntie and uncle who came up to me afterwards, even after the standing ovation, and said a variation of the following: "Beta, that was great, but what will the people think?" And I'm like, the people like it. He goes, nay, the people. And so
people.
Once I got the validation of and so look, strategically, I hate saying this, but colonialism is a hell of a drug. Whiteness is a hell of a drug. Once you got Gora's white people to sign off on it, that's when our people came on board. Like Dave Eggers, he likes Emma Thompson likes it. Tika, the people like it. Oh, it's in the San Jose Merc, SF Chronicle. So this play that was crapped upon, that was given no chance, that people said no one would care about. McSweeney's published in 2010, and then last year McSweeney's on its own came to me and said, can we do a 10-year anniversary of this play? Because in the moment that we're in this country, where we're having a conversation about, everything, this play is still topical. So do you mind if we publish this play again? I'm like, you know what? Why don't you wait 6 months instead of like April? Why don't you coincide it with the 20th anniversary of 9/11? And they're like, oh, that's great. And so lo and behold, this play, the new version with the new cover, with the new introduction by Hassan Minhaj, of all people, look how things come full circle. A new conversation between me, Ishmael Reed, and Carl LeBlanc, the director, and with a few edits where I did like a Ridley Scott Blade Runner edit. Like I just trimmed like 4 minutes. That's about it. You probably won't notice it, but there's just some lines that bothered me. But other than that, the play is still topical. I didn't like change anything from the 2010 version. And so mainly it is very, very just gratifying to look back now as a 41-year-old old man and see that a play that he started writing at the age of 21 that everyone told him would not appeal to the mainstream now has 2 publications and has validated and has been performed in England and Canada, and people have gotten their thesis done on it, and people are teaching it, and people have gone acting roles off of it. People have gone into drama school off it because they used some of the monologues, right? All these messages I've gone over the years. People have decided to leave their corporate job to become writers because they saw my journey, you know? So that's where I measure the wealth and the success. That's how it feels very gratifying.
What was the political climate when this first came out? Like, what do you remember from your felt experience of that day and age? When you first interacted with it, and then when you acted in it as well.
I see. So yeah, it had been like 8 years since 9/11, and Islamophobia was it was big. It was prevalent, right? And just brown people altogether. You saw it in your day-to-day, you felt it in your daily interactions with people. You felt it when you traveled outside of the US and how you were interrogated, or, or I traveled to London one time, and I was told to step aside while everyone else was going through. You saw it in the political climates in other countries like India becoming more fundamentalist. You saw it in the news where, like the war on, when we had the branding of war on terrorism, as like, as like the U.S. kills. Sorry, I don't know how political I can be on this, as the U.S. had killed innocent lives in Afghanistan, and we just getting out of this longest war in history. We also came out of a shameful quest of looking for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which there was none, So that was in 2009. We came out of that. And we called, the killing of innocent lives as collateral damage in the name of war on terrorism. So, it was, and of course there was just poorly portrayal of Muslims and brown folks in media. It was bad before, and it just got worse.
Yeah, it definitely got worse. Your stereotypical role for a brown guy either being like you're this like nerdy scientist tech guy, or the other 90%, which is you're a terrorist, you're a bomb maker, you're whatever. Right.
And then in 2009, Obama had just been elected, so there was a glimmer of hope and change, So that's when the Domestic Crusader was being staged. That was the backdrop, and it was exciting because I think we were all like a bit tired of the war on terrorism, of the stereotypes of brown folks and Islamophobia all around that. Hoping for storytelling to change, to bring some harmony, and stage this play. And that's what this play did, brought in a lot of harmony. I mean, there was just so many people from different walks of life coming to see it. It was just amazing. The house was always packed. And it was, I've never seen such a diverse audience. Like, we talk about diverse cast, but this was diverse audience, it was just amazing. I mean, you just felt the energy, and that was the energy we used for our acting, and staging it, just to reciprocate,
Obviously, the play is specifically about a Pakistani Muslim family, but obviously, we all know that the way that it was written, everybody can relate to it, and not even you don't even have to be a Desi person, or you don't even have to be a Muslim person, but it's like a typical American family. So tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're from New York. Where did your parents come from, and how did you use your cultural background to play the part that you did?
That's a great question. I was born, raised in New York. My family's from India. My mom is from a city called Roorkee, which is at the foot of the Himalayas in northern India. My dad was also from the north part, a city called Allahabad. And in this area, there's a lot of Muslims and Hindus living side by side.
Yeah.
My dad was more Buddhist. My mom was a little bit Hindu, but they weren't super religious, but they were just very, very spiritual, agnostic. And my dad was definitely political. So I get that side of my dad. He used to really address the caste system and talk about the life of Dalits in India. Mm-hmm. So, and he was a poet. So he brought poetry and activism together. I grew up with that.
Nice.
And also, when we moved to New York, our next door neighbor were from Pakistan. So my mom, those were our best friends. Mm. So, it was really like a lot of my learning about Islam and Muslim culture and Pakistani culture comes from that family. Mm-hmm. And so, we're still friends. The family, they're like sometimes family friends when you're an immigrant is closer than the family that you're related to back in the home country, right? So, yeah. So like we were just super close. I learned so much about Kashmir because the mother was from Kashmir, but lived in Pakistan and yeah. So
very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of my art and looking at art, and it was just growing up in New York and meeting so many different types of people. Like, oh my God, it was just so. New York is so diverse. Like that's your education.
A little bit about the character that you played, and then how was that experience playing that character?
Yeah, it was. So I played Fatima, and she's the middle daughter. She's a passionate law student who's very firm in her political ideas, very eloquent in her political ideas, her opinions. That's what makes her her. And she, she's like she has a boyfriend that her parents don't approve of, who's Muslim but Black, and her mother has like other ideas of what Fatima should be doing with her time. Instead of going to protests or marching for Palestinians, she should be learning to cook and going to the masjid, and should be going to find an acceptable life partner. So there was that struggle between her and her mother. And she was her father's favorite as well. So, she was definitely, a wonderful character to play. And I somehow related to her too. So,
Did you have parts of, I don't want to get too personal in your life, but did you have any kind of personal experiences from your own family or your own close friends that you kind of used for the character?
Yeah, I also have a lot of opinions, and my family knows that. And I think that Fatima took a lot of risks in her as a her being a woman and just pushing the limits from what her mom has been trying to put on her, which I feel I relate to. Like she definitely was a risk taker, and definitely. And the passion. She's a passionate character, and I felt like I related to that.
So, something that's pretty amazing, the restaurant at which the table reading was done back in, was it 2003, almost 20 years ago, 2 decades, that restaurant is still around. Not only is it still around, they're still thriving, and I want to give them a special shout out. Not only because they're a great restaurant, but they've been a staple in the Bay Area community for a very long time, and they supported Wajahat in this endeavor, not even realizing how big it would become. They believed in him, and they believed in his vision, and they supplied the buffet, which allowed for the table reading to be so well populated, and subsequently, well, the rest is history. Mehran Restaurant and Catering has been serving Indian and Pakistani cuisine to the Bay Area community since 1986. Located in Newark, now also serving halal Chinese food, along with popular Desi menu items including nahari, goat biryani, beef paya, and special kebab items such as reshmi kebab or chicken malai boti kebab. Please check Mehran out on Facebook and on Google Businesses and contact Mehran for all your catering needs. You can reach the restaurant at 510-668-1111 or feel free to call Fiaz directly at 925-765-4290.
Diving right into it, what was the political climate when this first came out, when you chose to act in this role? What was sort of, take us to this time and place? What was going on?
Thank
when
you.
was
Yeah, it's a great question. My goodness, talk about immediate reframing. It was April of 2009, and I had come to New York for a 6-week engagement at a company I had worked at in the past. I didn't have a green card then, so I was fighting for legal, like every time I had an H-1B, I had to get jobs while the H-1B lasted. My Israeli friends were getting H-1s for 2 years, and I would get it for a year, which meant 9 months, because, So I couldn't find anything in the Bay Area. This company I'd worked on in New York, they said, in the past, they said, hey, please come, we need you. So I was there, and I was literally on the last day of my engagement when Saqib calls and says, hey, AZ, Wajahat, the playwright, is calling me and he wants me to come out to the East Coast to do this play, but you can do it, man. I mean, because Saqib and I had chatted in the past, we're friends, and he knew that I had been a thespian since before. First role being I think I was in class 4 when I played Careful Hans. And he said, you can do it. And I was like, but I'm missing my kids. I hadn't seen my kids in 6 weeks, and I'd gone through a divorce, and, my kid's stepdad wasn't letting me talk to my kids. So I was dealing with the pain of separation from my kids. And then I was told that, this is something really important. Saqib basically laid it out. He said, this is a period of history. It's very essential. And especially with 9/11 coming up, there's going to be a very significant, he basically laid it in my lap. He said, this is going to be big. It's huge. And more than anything else, think of it as a social responsibility that someone's got to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm coming out there. I have a job. I'm going to leave and I'm going to come out there and spend the months and it's going to be very tough for me, but that's how important it is. So tell me you can help me. He basically called on a favor from a buddy. And so on that, I set up a meeting with Wajahat. I went that weekend and I auditioned. And the first time I was reading it, I was in tears. I was reading part of the monologue, which Dada Hakim eventually does 11 minutes of. I was in tears. I hadn't read it before. There was no time. So I'm sitting here reading. So I read it through once and I had to stop. And then they had me do it again. And the second time I did it, so Wajahat actually gave me a hint that really helped me later on. He said, you don't have to, a good actor, the mark of a good actor is that you don't wear your pain on your face for people to see. You hold it just behind your face. Like he literally said, I was wearing a shirt. He said, just keep it right under your sleeve. It's right here. It's accessible if you need it. But, think of something that is very painful for you. I said, well, my separation from my kids. He says, that's it. Use that. From that moment on, he gave me a grab. And my grab was my separation from my kids. And using that, I was able to think of my kids while reading this extremely emotional, extremely heart-wrenching, it's a gut-wrenching read. And while reading it, I was able to think of something else that was giving me tremendous pain. And I was able to, a lot of actors have a very hard time finding a grab that they can use. Because I had this kind of guidance from Wajahat, a few times he did that. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about a few more examples, but that right there became a very significant, and that's why from the beginning, I think Carla, she said from there, she knew that I would be the primary. There's a primary and a secondary in major productions, and I think it was just because I felt it so strongly. So, yeah.
Wow.
It was a tremendous experience of personal growth. I had the kind of a team that few people are lucky to get. We had a dramaturge of Carla Blank's experience. We had Ishmael Reed guiding and he had helped develop this play. But once we got to the practices, we had, it was incredible. It was so great that afterward, I went to Pakistan. I spent 2 years. My mom was at the end of her life. And when I came back, I had a chance to be part of a local Bay Area drama company here called Natak. And I got into a play. I played the Qaid-e-Azam role in Mantu's Toba Tek Singh play adaptation. And I did that because I had that experience with Domestic Crusaders, and I realized that if I want to get into a high-level mode of delivery for myself and for my life, it'll be good to be part of a team that's delivering at that level. And Natak was definitely at that level, and I had that experience again. So to answer your question, it was a powerful, just, on-ramping experience where everybody's giving their all and working at a very incredible rate. The kind of a team that people are lucky to have once in their lives. It was incredible.
And where were you born and your education?
My father was in the Pakistan Air Force as a fighter pilot. And so I grew up all over the world. 12, what was it? It's 8 countries in 8 countries and 4 continents and more than 20 homes by the time I was 20. And it's just the way, military life goes. So mostly in Pakistan Air Force schools, but, spent a year in the States, spent 2 years in Libya, 2 years in Syria, Italy, England, Bangladesh, so Iran. Yeah, so I grew up all over the world, global nomad, which really, really helps you have a bigger outlook. And for Pakistanis, that point of your brain opening and you realizing that, Indians aren't our enemies. They're actually normal human beings. And having, dear friendships with people from, like having an Israeli best friend, that most Pakistanis would not find possible. But a time comes, just like in this training, a time comes when you go through different experiences, something opens inside you and you see things from other perspectives.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that role of the grandfather. I know, like for me personally, when I watched it at Mehran and I also watched the Berkeley one, that was one of the favorite characters because just, his interesting life story and things like that. So tell us what you thought about that role and how did it affect you?
Thank you. People don't think much of the Dada. Wajahat as a playwright pulls a sort of, I guess we could call it, he pulls an M. Night Shyamalan toward the end of the play, right? Because Dada Hakim was this cute, funny guy who's saying these, occasional quips and making these funny comments at people. He's literally comic relief throughout the play. And then at the end, he opens up and comes out with this, bombshell of a story that, hey, your family has this history and you had no idea. So I don't think we should spoil the play for people. It's a great play to watch, read, explore. Just getting into the play was getting in touch with something that was a significant point of pain for me. But that point of pain enabled me to deliver my role as Dada Hakim. And the most significant part of that play, the monologue he has at the end.
In front of my eyes, all our eyes, they told him to come out. Said they only wanted to talk. As soon as he came out, they took a knife and thrust it in his chest. I couldn't move. I did nothing. Nobody did anything. I had never seen a man die before. And my friend Amir, He was stupid and used to chase after girls and shoot off his pagal mouth, but not deserving to die. Not deserving to die. And they killed him. And I did nothing. I was so afraid, I couldn't move.
There is something to be gained by experience. The original Dune in 84, father says to the son that, experience changes something. It's not just experience. Change causes something deep inside to awaken. And here I am playing a role where, I'm saying these things that Dada Hakim says. You can only use your like the word I used, my go-to, right? The tool that I had, which is that I could think of the pain of my kids to hold my tears back and to stay at the threshold of being able to deliver these lines and yet be composed. But it affects you. It's difficult. I wasn't a formal professional actor. I had acted in the past, but the previous role, the role of Careful Hans, was very happy-go-lucky. This kid is just, he's everything he does, he applies. Whatever he does something wrong, and then the instructions he gets, he applies those instructions on the next thing he's doing, which makes it wrong. It's a really funny play, but it's very situational in that sense. Here, Dada had to hold. Dada essentially had to bring home all the work that everybody had done throughout the play by using it's not so much a conflict, but using an exchange that happens to trigger and to make that trigger believable. I found, I believe I'm still learning. Like in talking to you guys right now, I'm still learning from that experience. I don't think something as significant as that ends giving you the lessons that it's meant to give you. But yeah, it was a deep look inside. It was like tearing yourself apart and looking at what you're made of. It was a great experience.
So if you can just connect some of the dots here, like what was happening politically? What was your experience as a Muslim in the politics when the Domestic Crusaders first came out, and then when you acted in it, and how about now looking back?
I'm glad you raised this because we had completely missed that earlier. Well, when the play came out is a completely different conversation than up till that point. So let me start first with when the play came out, there was an awareness. The play is written so brilliantly. Like, it's interesting that we're saying we are the Crusaders, but who did the Crusades, right? It was the Crusades were done against Muslims, and the Muslims were the people who were the most hurt by them. And they were essentially, whatever the historical context may have been, here we are the Domestic Crusaders. Here we are a family trying to show to the world that, hey, we're one of you. You're us. We're you. We're one of your family. And that's the biggest feedback that Wajahat got as a playwright, that people would come up, old Jewish people, old grandmas would come up and say, that was my family. It's not a Muslim family or a Pakistani-American family when you're watching the play. They may be wearing the skin of a Pakistani-American or a Muslim, but it's a normal American family. And the crusade was to show people that there is this conflict going on, which has tremendous historical, undertones. But in today's world right now, it affects us right now, and it's affecting us. So that in my own life showed up as I was in a marriage to a Turkish Arab who, for different reasons, realized, and some of the reasons you mentioned earlier, she was a Sunni Muslim, I was a Shiite Muslim, and I had my personal awakening in faith and in a lot of spiritual aspects of my life. I had near-death experiences. I had my awakening happen after we got married. Levels of my awakening, like Rumi says, peel off the layers of the onion. So I had layers of the onion peeling in the process of, building a life with my partner. And as these layers peeled, it turned out that the direction that I was going into, which was inward, was not the direction that my partner had wanted me to be in. So I was at a very early time, I lost the support of my partner, and my immigration process was made. It was affected. I'll just say that. and I didn't get my,
Right.
so I was dealing with, I had a 10 plus year process of suing the US government and getting a green card. So I had to go through, in fact, now I can talk about it. Joe Biden had a law that he started, which was so significant, called Violence Against Women's Act. It was a spousal abuse clause in the US Immigration Code. I was one of only 2 men known to my attorney who got their US immigration because of suing the US government utilizing the Violence Against Women's Act, which is no longer. It's gone away. Because the Republicans,
Wow.
whatever, it's the reality of our time that it's party politics, and party politics caused such a useful and essential law to expire. So I had dealt with that. I mentioned earlier I was dealing with H1 renewals. It was crazy. It was very difficult. So I was dealing with a very real effect of 9/11 in my life, being a young Pakistani Muslim, being a young Muslim male of Pakistani origin, where, when I even had an interview with the Immigration Service, and I learned later on by my later attorney that they should have given you a provisional green card then, because they said we can't give you a green card because your security clearance hasn't come through. Well, with every other nationality, they give you the green card on a provisional basis, so that if your security clearance comes through, it's retroactive. In my case, being a young Pakistani, I didn't get one, and I had to deal with this more than a decade later. So yeah, I was dealing with it in a very real way in my personal life, but I was, dealing with it. Coming to the play, the awareness that we're dealing with 9/11 and this play is premiering on this date, that is the reason why I understood the depth and it's the weight of what Saqib Rasool, Saqib Mausuf say to me. Saqib Rasool is my coach. Saqib Mausuf was he conveyed to me the importance of it, why the timing matters. He didn't talk about how, there is wordplay going on. There is a twist in the play, in the presentation of the play, the name of the play, at the end of the play. He didn't talk about the ingenuity with which the play was written. But yeah, coming to the play, I was made aware of how significant it was. And as we went through the trainings, Carla led us, for instance, the family went on a road trip. As a team, as a play acting family, we are sitting in a enclosed space in a van, and we're going on a road trip, and everybody's holding character. It's the method acting approach. It was amazing getting to know these people as the family that we were playing, under the backdrop of what we are preparing for. So it was lost on no one, the importance of what, and the play happened again and again. We did it in Washington, D.C. We did it at the Kennedy Center. So it happened a number of times. We did it in Berkeley also. I think the significance of it was not lost then. And I believe this interview happening is proof that the significance is not lost even now. Yeah, I think it was a very significant play of our time.
What pushed you to the stage where most people find themselves very, very uncomfortable, and in fact, public speaking is ranked the number one fear, higher than death even. What kept you coming back to the stage, and what are some experiences that you had as an actor for Domestic Crusaders that you still remember starkly?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. To be honest, I was terrified of the stage as well. And I was terrified of public speaking as well. In 6th grade, I once had an assignment to write. We were in military schools, so we had a topic, and you had to speak either for it or against it. And the topic was preparation for war is necessary for peace. And I chose to speak for it. So I wrote a pretty nice speech, but I had a hard time delivering it. So that and a few other times I found that I've written something really powerful, but when it comes time to delivery, I wish I had practiced more. So that's one thing I brought to this play. And, Dada Hakim has an 11-minute monologue at the end, and he has to deliver it without any, there's no book, or you can't have notes. So memorizing that and using, cues inside and emotional cues among them. One thing that you had said about acting, we're all actors. We're always, all of us, with our spouses, with our friends, with our, you're standing in line. We're all acting. We all have different characters we play. So we may not realize it, but that's one thing. In the context of that, I want to say that in today's world, like in the past, we had plays, and then in our more recent past, we've had movies. It is, and of course, the same in books. I had this experience when reading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse for the third time, where the first time I read the book, about halfway through, I found that I wasn't able to hold interest. But I was told this is a significant book and that it would be significant for me. And the person who told me I respected. So I finished the book. But I felt I didn't get much out of it. So I read the book through again. And I was reading the book through another year or two later, and I felt that there is something here. But I don't know if I'm getting what's meant for me here. So in 96, I read this book for the third time. And of course, I'm dating myself. I'm in my mid-20s. But in reading this book, from the very beginning, third time I'm reading this book, it became my story. I am completely experiencing what I'm reading. I've become the protagonist. It's my story that I'm reading from beginning to end. And it happened to me after that, that I read this short story called The Indian Life, which is 17 pages. The Indian Life is 17 pages if you print it out in a PDF. So on a normal 8.5 by 11 size sheet. I read it at the end of, I was given because I loved Siddhartha, and I experienced this experience. I was looking for more things by Hermann Hesse. I was given this huge book called Master of the Game in German, Magister Ludi, but in English it's called The Glass Bead Game. So it was too thick. I tried reading it. It was just, I kept thinking of how they're describing Qom, like a seminary, a theological location. Maybe it's like this at the Vatican. That's what they were describing essentially. So I didn't read that book, but toward the end I saw there were 3 short stories, and The Indian Life in that paperback book was 50 pages, 51. And The Indian Life was another experience. I read this book and I become this character. And it's funny that I first experienced that in Hermann Hesse's works. So in reading a character and becoming that character becomes a journey. And we may not realize it, but we talked about Star Wars earlier. Star Wars has the same effect. I was Luke Skywalker when I saw that movie. And we're talking late 70s. I had come across, and the reason I mention this, I had come across an amazing movie by Patrick Stewart, the guy who plays Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart. It was called Dune. Now Dune is big because there's a new version of it, but that 1984 version of Dune, in that story, a few things were said which impacted me greatly. And it was like being in Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, or in being, Gautama in The India Life, where I'm reading this story, but what I'm going through, what I'm experiencing is a personal journey. So acting to me is attractive because of the personal journey it represents. And I noticed that because of these Careful Hans playing that, I was a 4th grader. That was just, a fun thing I did. I found that in doing skits in college, I would literally be the funniest guy. And I was super awesome in skits. And I'd come up with amazing ideas. And we'd have so much fun making the skit that even on stage, we'd be doing the skit and we'd be laughing at our own jokes. And I found that comes naturally to me. Letting go of the shell of AZ and Zahir Abbas and being the character that AZ is playing is liberating, because you get to be whatever you invent or whatever is defined in that role. So from that perspective, public speaking became easier for me. I started doing Master of Ceremonies work, and I became really good at it. And I realized a Master of Ceremony is an actor. Like, you're taking the content, and in this case, the content is people's energy. You literally are taking.
Exactly. You're just playing with their energy.
You're the amplifier or modulator, and you're giving that right back to them. And this is another thing you might find interesting, because I know, are a big Master of Ceremonies for the Halal Fest and stuff. Every time before I'd go on stage, I'd have an experience just before, like in panic mode. I have to go to the bathroom, and the contents of my stomach would jump out of me. Like, literally, I'd clear my stomach. Wow. So I'll say it. It was a number 10. And having done that, I would be clear. I'd be clear-headed, clear-hearted, clear mind, and I would excel in my roles. And I noticed that was a constant. I noticed that would happen again and again. So,
Is that a piece of advice you want to give to young actors? Let everything loose and out.
Okay, in Urdu, the word is dust. That's why we say number 10. It's when just everything comes out and, nothing is held back because it's all liquid. But yeah, excuse me. I
Right.
apologize for the graphic.
Right. We're not talking about emotional release here, ladies and gentlemen.
Aided by, the tools the body has. But yeah, so acting is
Yeah.
liberating. The answer to the question is acting is the most liberating thing I know to do. And the reason I mentioned Dune, the original Dune, there is a line that is used in the new version of the book as well. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death. I will walk through my fear and let it pass through me. And for me to be on stage in the 90s, it was embodying those lines. Fear is the little death. Fear is the mind killer. I will not let my fear overcome me. I will walk through my fear. And that's what I teach my kids. It's what I teach my wife. It's what I teach my friends. You have to walk through your fear. You have to face your fear. Avoiding your fear. And I'm saying this, and I'm going through another significant change right now, and I'm saying it as much for myself as any listener. We have to face our fears. Avoiding our fears makes us less than who we are. Walking through our fears, it's the power of letting go. Whatever you have the power of letting go ceases to have any power over you.
So definitely being on stage with a long and emotional monologue, like that's not easy. What was that experience like for you? Is there anything that really stands out?
It wasn't all me. It was part of the team. It was part of the hard work we all did, the training. And yeah, there was a bit of me in there, but I think it all comes together. It's all like you're a chef, it's every little ingredient that makes the dish, right? It's that little bit of, chili put in an omelet that brings that little, it's people may not even realize little ingredients here and there go in to make a masterpiece. And it was a masterpiece, but I obviously can't claim the credit. I was a cog in a big machine. And in that part of the play, I may have been a more significant cog or a more significant machine in the bigger machine. But I think it was a genius, it's an ingenious play. And with Carla's help, put together incredibly. The dramaturge is a very significant part of making a play successful. And Carla Blank she's a genius of her own. I mean, it was historic to be able to have Ishmael Reed, Carla Blank, Wajahat, the cast we had, even our backup cast, they were amazing. They were wonderful. They were a second cast, So, yeah, we did some mixing and matching here and there later on. But to this day, I think it's because of what my uncle said to me, it ranks as one of the highest accomplishments of my life.
Oh, wow.
So far.
Nice.
Yeah. I treasure that experience, and it's, I think every human being would benefit from at least one exposure to playing a role in a play or a skit or something where you get to be somebody other than yourself, because we're doing it all the time anyway, but unconsciously. So it's great to do it consciously and to experience the liberation that comes from it.
Wow. Right. Thank you very much for sharing.
It's my pleasure.
I really can't say anything more than that. It was a really powerful closing.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Artistic Foodies. We had a great time being inspired by the creatives who made the Domestic Crusaders happen. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Be sure to find us on Facebook and Instagram, and stay tuned for more episodes as well as bonus content. You can also have access to all our episodes at theartisticfoodies.com.
This podcast has been brought to you by Halal Fest Incorporated and Gathering All Muslim Artists. Autobots roll out.